Thank you for finding the NSE podcast on YouTube. To find links for our online hospitality security training, check out the video description below. Enjoy the Nightlife Security Podcast.
Welcome to the Nightclub Security Podcast, a professional resource for the nightclub security industry. Whether you're a nightclub bouncer, guard, owner, or operator, this is the podcast for you. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain. Let's get started.
Welcome, everybody. Listen to the Nightclub Security Podcast. This is your host, Manny Marquez. I'm here with nightclub security industry expert, Robert C. Smith. Good afternoon, Robert.
I'm doing good, buddy.
Well, hey,
How are you?
I'm good. We're coming to you live from our studio here in Mission Hills, California, on a slightly rainy and windy day.
Extremely windy, extremely rainy.
Yeah, we've been under a drought here in Southern California, so this is a welcome rainstorm. You all right there, Bob?
I'm good, man. Just losing my wires coming out of my ear.
You need help with your Starbucks there?
I'm good.
I asked you, are you ready to start?
I'm good. We're rolling. Keep rolling. We are in a drought in California.
Bobby's not going to go.
We're in a drought in California. Go ahead.
Put your Starbucks
I'll put it back down on the
there
table.
You go.
Okay.
Attaboy.
Okay.
All right. Bob's settled, so we can start the show. So
we're in a drought in California.
We are in a drought. And this is welcome rain, but from what I hear, we'll have to have a storm like this every day until May.
I don't know, but it's crazy rain. And it's nice to see, and sorry for you guys getting the snow and, mounds of it and months of it in the East Coast. Just understand that, all things are relative, and we're not used to it out here, so it's kind of funky.
Yeah, with some of the fires from the season in L.A., there's been some mudslides. They're actually doing a little worse than we are here in San Diego. It's not that bad here, so... But anyway, we're going to get started with today's show. And as always, we'd like to do a couple of things. First, we'd like to do a couple of shout-outs. Actually, our shout-out for this week is for a restaurant partnership here in town, restaurant and club bar, Whiskey Girl and the Double Deuce, two clubs that are longtime staples here in Southern California. We're actually going to be part of their team and doing a full-service contract for them this year, which I'm really excited about. We'll be working with Ryan O'Leary. We got Jerry Lopez at the Whiskey Girl, and then also Dave Schiffman, who is the operations guy there. So,
and let me thank you. That's a good get. You worked on that one. I believe that's the first true introduction explanation get for a long-term contract, and that you got, and it's a good one. I like those guys.
Yeah, it's a good group of guys. There's actually here in San Diego. It's funny because within our industry, there's a close-knit group of people, and it seems like at one point either you've worked with somebody or you've been a part of their team. So it's a nice little network that to be a part of. And so I'll be working with Ryan O'Leary again. He was actually part of a restaurant group when I was with the Moose Restaurant Group, Typhoon Saloon, and Fred's.
If you're in another part of the country or another part of the world, what we do, we have a service that, unfortunately, it's a little difficult to do it to places out of the immediate locale of San Diego, but we go in as a full-service consultation company for their California licensing training, consultation. We work with servers. We'll work with them about report writing, work about their CCTV system, liaison with police, help them with post-incident diagnosis and talk about things that occurred and what could have been done differently. A really unique program that we offer, and it's pretty beneficial.
Yeah, it's the package that we put together is pretty much soup to nuts as far as everything security. And
what does that mean?
Soup to nuts?
Yeah.
You start
A to Z?
Yeah, A to Z.
Beginning to end?
Yeah, you start with soup.
Soup to nuts.
At the end of the night, you have some nuts. I don't know.
All right.
Soup to nuts.
All right.
So it's a full service package, and we're really happy to be a part of working with Whiskey Girl and the Double Deuce. And as always, if you're in San Diego, Double Deuce, lots of fun if you like to ride mechanical bulls.
It's a unique setting for an urban. They've been open for, 4 or 5 years now.
They're going on
7. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And they were the first ones within the city proper of San Diego to have a mechanical bull. There's another large establishment in part of town that has one, but they're kind of out on the edges. This is the first one downtown, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then the Whiskey Girl is a nice sports bar there on 5th and G Street.
They're in their second location, but this one I think is far better than their first.
Yeah. So if you have a chance, make sure you visit our friends there at the Whiskey Grill and Double Deuce. I think we got to talk about some news this week.
Yeah, pretty sobering news story. This is out of San Jose, California, and we're not just trying to stay in California. Although when we started podcasting, we beat up Florida with all their violent incidents. This one's out of San Jose. It involves the death of an off-duty bouncer, and this is a pretty involved story. If you want to look it up, you can. But it involves a bouncer who is off-duty at his own club in San Jose, having a few cocktails. A gentleman comes in who is from another establishment. He's a cook, and he gets off of work, and he's got his chef or cook, and he's got his package of knives that he uses on his own. He goes to come in the bar. They say, "I'm sorry, we can hold him. You can't let you in." And he says, yeah. And he checks him behind the bar. He has a few too many cocktails, it appears. He bothers a couple of people. They ask him to leave, and then they have to give him his knives back. There's some discussion on his end, and there's some investigation by the police that showed that there may have been some words about veiled threats about this cook and chef with his knives. And unfortunately, the off-duty bouncer took it on his own to follow the chef out the door, down the street, around the corner. There was a confrontation with the off-duty bouncer and the chef used one of his own knives to stab and kill the off-duty bouncer. On first glance, it should raise some questions to you, and I'll let you know that 2 days later, after the chef was arrested, they released him because the police did a pretty thorough investigation, recovered all the video, interviewed everyone, and it appeared the off-duty bouncer, unfortunately, walked out of the bar following the chef, and he had his own knife in his hand.
And so he basically aggravated or instigated the confrontation.
Yeah, he pursued the guy down the street. And when I say pursue, that's a police term. It doesn't mean you ran after him. You just followed him. It sounds more intimidating when they say pursue, and that's the words they use when they declined to file charges against the chef for murder, not even involuntary manslaughter. The video evidence clearly shows the guard at 6'3", 6'2", whatever it was, the chef who was much shorter, 5'9" maybe, and the bouncer went after him with his own knife, and unfortunately he lost and was killed. So it brings up a couple of points that hopefully you're going to think about. Number one, should you let knives or weapons come in your bar? Should you check them? Should you make someone go home and put them away? And I think the second one is, should you let your employees, whether they're a bouncer or not, stay on board your place and drink?
So just a comment on the first part that you brought up is allowing weapons. Now, here in the Gas Lamp, where we work, or where I used to work, there's a lot of restaurants and venues around. And, I could see this happening in our part of town where, a lot of people are getting off work and you have a lot of industry people that frequent your bar. So I could see this easily happening at one of the many places that I've worked here, where the guy, he's a regular, he gets off work, he probably still has a chef jacket on, he wants to have a couple pops before he goes home. And so I could see myself actually in that position to where I would hold someone's knives for him. But, after listening to something like this, it just kind of raises a question, well, is that the right thing to do? Is that the safest thing to do?
And from the time I started this company, the whole idea was to give bouncers, and then shortly thereafter, within a year of developing the company, not just in-house guards, but give operators a better chance to succeed. And I've always said that you don't allow weapons in the club or bar. If it's someone you just don't do it. If it's an off-duty cop, you just don't do it. You let them take it to wherever they got to take it and come back in, and you be as nice as you can, but you teach that culture. Pretty soon, no one's bringing their off-duty knives or their off-duty weapon or anything else into the venue.
Yeah, and for some of the people that are not familiar with the industry as far as the culinary side, a lot of times chefs are required to bring their own knives. It's just, it's kind of the culture of the cooking world.
Understand that, bouncers may have their own flashlights, their own magnifying glass, their own whatever they have as their equipment, and this is the same thing.
So the second point you raise on the story, Robert, is the idea of off-duty employees drinking at the establishment. Obviously in this case, it went against the venue. What are your initial thoughts on?
Well, I know it's done, and when I teach, I try to teach to 3 levels. I just came back from Miami, and I teach to 3 levels. Number one, I teach to the standard of the club. I teach to the industry standard, and then I teach to the state rules or local laws. And there is no local law that says you can't drink off duty at your own bar. Now, you may have an internal policy that I would teach to that you can't, but an industry standard is that many operators, and I think much like yourself, you kind of want that your own staff members, when they're off, to come to your own bar because they come with friends. They're going to always talk good, and generally they're not going to be trouble at your own bar, whether they get a discount for their cocktails or not, but they're already bringing other people in that are spending. And I know the industry standard, but as a security consultant, I've got to side on the against it part because it just allows the door of liability to be open for that moment that they're drinking at your own establishment. And in this case, as a bouncer, worst case scenario is this guy dies. But another scenario could be he's there at the bar having a few pops, as you call them, and a fight breaks out. You know this guy's going to jump in to help his friends, but he's been drinking. He hurt someone, whether it was lawful or not, they're going to ask him, and he's been drinking. Maybe he's over-intoxicated, and you allowed that to go on. And it just opens a door for a lot of other issues. So my recommendation is, unfortunately, I'm sorry, that you don't allow employees to consume off-duty at your place.
And I'm going to come from the operations standpoint and just, I know this sort of thing happens, and I was talking to Robert about this prior to the podcast, and I like the idea of having my employees be able to enjoy the environment that we've created and have a good time, and it's a benefit to them, and it's an added perk. But I think where it lies is in the management, and two things in place. You have a policy in place on what's allowed, what's not allowed. So one of those policies could be you're never over intoxicated. And the other thing would be expectations. And the question is whether or not management communicates those expectations to the employees in a clear and deliberate manner. So what I mean by that is actually sitting down your employees and say, hey, listen, when you come in and you're enjoying the restaurant or the bar or the club, you don't get out of hand. You don't get over intoxicated. If you do, you'll be asked to leave. And the expectation is that you be in control of your own actions and you know when to make that decision. If I have to come in and I have to tell you to leave, now we have an issue. If you can control your consumption and you know when it's time to leave, that's being responsible. That's what I expect out of you.
And when Manny mentioned policies, it's not just sitting with your employee and saying that over the bar when you hire them. Have it written. We encourage you to come in. We want you to partake in our establishment, in your establishment. We're a family. We're a team. We want you here. However, you have to be
in control
and at a higher standard than some of our guests. So you got to clearly, as a management unit, you got to clearly state that policy, and it's got to be stated in writing too.
Yeah, and something like that would be done on a new hire. And it's always those two things: your policy that's in place, communicating that, and your expectations set forth, and you should be good. And that's my thoughts on it.
Yep.
All right, so that's our news topic for today. Robert, today's show topic, what are we going to be talking about?
It's a pretty good one, I think. It covers a lot of area, and hopefully our listeners will get something out of it. And again, we're going to present some plus, minus, pro, con issues, but it involves the front door or a server when they get a known bad ID, borrowed, altered, or an internet fake. What are you doing with it? And specifically, can you confiscate? And if you don't know, we're going to give you some options to whether confiscation or calling it abandoned. So we're going to talk about that today.
All right. Well, that's the introduction of the topic. We're going to take a little quick break here, so stick with us. When we come back, we'll dive into today's topic, confiscating fake or borrowed IDs. We'll be right back. If you like our show, visit nightclubsecurity.com for more information and access to free resources. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Robert, today's topic, we're going to be talking about when you come across a fake or borrowed ID, and can you confiscate that ID? Yes or no? Talk about some issues that surround that, maybe some policies. So that's our topic. Where do you want to start with it?
Well, let's just first define two areas. So if you're listening to this, think about it. Now, if there's something else we're missing, we encourage you to send us an email, and we'll add it in later. But number one, a true borrowed ID, and that's the majority of what you see from underage people. They borrow their friend's ID, guy or girlfriend. They borrow the ID and they present it at the door. So this is a legitimately issued state ID that is passed off in the line, in the car, presented at your door to the guard, or passed off, borrowed in the car, and they're already at the bar because there's no door guard, and they're at the table ordering their drinks with dinner, and the server discovers it's a borrowed or passed off ID. So the first one we're going to talk about is that one, the legitimately issued state ID. And the second one is the truly fake ID, the internet fake ID, whether it's from the new breed that's been out there about 3 years, the idchief.com, the China fakes produced in China or South America or the Philippines, but they're truly fake IDs. They're not legitimately issued, they're fake.
And you're missing a third.
And the third one would be
Altered.
Okay. And what we're talking about there, though, are the truly state-issued ID that perhaps it's been altered in some fashion. And I think for the majority of the in-house guards or servers, altered IDs are almost by the wayside. I'm trying to think of the last truly altered ID. And by altered, we mean changed, where they...
You're thinking about like in the old days where you used to take some white out and a red pin over the year of birth and
an X-Acto knife over one number and change it.
When the laminate IDs were still in play and you could cut out the picture and shove your picture in there.
Yeah, or even folding the harder plastic IDs where they would snap or bend right at the year. Thereby, you couldn't see the final number in the year, and hopefully they'd get by that way. So I honestly believe, and I'll really have to look into that now, but I think we can almost leave the altered part of this discussion out, because we'll just consider them under the same umbrella as a legitimate state-issued ID where they're discovered in whatever fashion. You know it's not the fat person in front of you because the ID shows she's skinny. You know it's not this guy because he's 6'2" and it shows he's 5'7", or the legitimate state ID that has clearly been altered.
Well, first of all, she could have lost weight.
Yeah, that's true. Staple stomach. Yeah. She could have lost weight.
And you're saying that the altered ID has gone the way of the dodo bird.
Yep. I've never seen a dodo bird. I believe so.
There's probably some states out there that they're still working it.
I would encourage, if we have listeners that understand what we mean by altered, this is a legitimate state ID issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles or Public Department of Transportation, where someone has altered it, changed it physically with a new photo, an X-Acto knife, colors, or paints. I really think those have gone by the wayside. You may see a fringe one, but let's lump them in the same group as a legitimate state-issued ID, because that's what we're talking about.
Okay. And then also on the other side, the fake ID.
The internet fake IDs that are out there, the ones you can get, whether you're in LA, you can go down to certain areas in Los Angeles, or in your New York area, you can get them there on the road, on the street. But most of them are coming from overseas, packaged in, and it's really kind of unique. If you go to YouTube, you can find these where people have outed the companies on accident, but I think on purpose. 20-year-olds ordering college students, and you'll see the ID come to them in the bottom of a jewelry box. So they're getting a cheap piece of China jewelry, and on the bottom of the styrofoam underneath the watch or ring is the fake ID from overseas.
I haven't seen those yet. They actually had a pretty big ring, not a ring, but some kids at UC San Diego that were getting pretty sophisticated about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, they've had 2 of those in the time I've been here in San Diego, the 15 years of the company. I've seen 2 of those rings get busted by the Department of Motor Vehicles and the feds.
Yeah, they're getting very creative, and they're getting better and better on the fake. So that's some of these are pretty hard to tell whether or not they're real or not. So we got the types. Let's say you come across something that's borrowed.
Okay.
Obviously not the person, passed off.
Now we're not getting into the checking. We just want you to consider, once you know it's fake or borrowed, this is, there's no other questions. You're done with all your checks, your lights, your books. You know it's fake, okay? So now bear with us. What do you do with it?
We're borrowed.
We're talking about a borrowed one. So Susie has passed off her ID to Jenny. Jenny comes up to your door at 18 years old, and she's holding Susie's 21-year-old ID. It's a passed off or borrowed, legitimately made state ID. You've got a couple of options. And if you're in a state like California, you can legally confiscate the ID. Many of you do this already in your own states, but I think it's really important you look up what you do to make sure you're legal. We'll cover that a little bit more in a minute. But in California, you get the ID, you know it's borrowed, you can legally confiscate it. Put that bad boy in your pocket, tell the person to go away. Once you give them, and this is the law, you have to give them a receipt of any kind. Doesn't matter. You can write receipt and give it to them. What one of our clients does, Typhoon Saloon, they have business cards printed up with their logo on one side, and on the back side, it's the legal section that says why their ID was confiscated. Or give them something else for a receipt.
Yeah,
Print one out on the POS.
On the backside of that receipt, it just says just a short, like half paragraph of why they're taking the ID.
Your ID was taken per Business and Professions Code section.
You put the date, and then you put who it was taken by. And then that receipt is given to the person whom you've confiscated the ID from.
Correct. That's part of the law. That's part one. And the second part of the law for California, when you confiscate a borrowed ID, is that you turn it into law enforcement within a 24-hour period. Well, Manny, let me ask you, when you were the GM of one of these many bars and your guys confiscated IDs, be honest, did you ever turn them into law enforcement within 24 hours?
Normally what we do is we would send somebody twice a week. So if we had, let's say, like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we had 5 IDs that we confiscated, on Monday morning I would give that to my bookkeeper, and they would run it down to, we had a satellite police station. We would just drop them off there in an envelope, and that was that.
Yeah. And the state of California knew this when they wrote the law, that they had to put something in so guards wouldn't be keeping the IDs and trying to resell them, and there was some consequence there. But that is a true confiscation. You get the person in front of you, they borrow the ID, you know it's not them, you put it in their pocket, you give them a receipt, you turn it into law enforcement with an amount of time. That's one possible solution to getting that borrowed ID. Now, if you're not in California...
Is there another state that you know of?
I know of no other state that allows confiscation off the top of my head. I know they exist because I've talked to other bouncers, but I haven't read the law for the other states.
So if this is something that you don't know, it would be a good idea to research your state to see what the law is on that.
And there's not a database for this where you're going to have to research it on your own, and doing Google searches sometimes for this kind of stuff just doesn't work. You're going to have to really call your state ABC agent and ask them the question. And when they say, yes, you can, ask them what the section is, because then you can look it up and you'll have proof positive that you legitimately can, and for what reason, to confiscate this borrowed ID, a state-issued ID driver's license. And real quick, Manny, when we say ID, we're talking about passports too. We're talking about a real state-issued passport. I'm sorry, a federal-issued passport or a federally issued military ID. Any ID that is borrowed, if you're in a state that allows confiscation, confiscate it. If some cop told you, and it's done here in California, guys, folks, I'll tell you, the cops say, oh, you can't confiscate military ID. You politely, nicely ask them, officer, could you give me the section that says that? Because it doesn't exist. And if you read California law, it's crystal clear. It says any ID. So
there's the confiscation where in states where it's legal. If it's not legal to confiscate an ID, what does a bouncer or manager do?
And let me ask you, Manny, what did you do? Whether you knew the law, and I know you were working in the industry when the law passed in California, but if you were in a state where you didn't know and your door guard said, hey, Manny, I got this ID and it's clearly a Florida issued license, but this isn't her, without going on our conversations we've had, what would you do? What would you tell your guard to do?
The normal procedure would be if it was obvious and with all certainty I could say it wasn't the person, it was a borrowed ID, we would say, I'm not going to be able to give this back to you. If they requested it again, normally you would have two situations. One, you say, this isn't you, I'm keeping it. They would just walk away. That'd be one. If they insisted that they have it back, I would ask them to find a police officer or law enforcement to verify. And if it was them, I would allow the police officer to give it back to them directly.
Okay. And what if there was a third one for you? What if the owner of the ID, 40 minutes later, when Susie walked away, the 19-year-old leaves, but the 21-year-old walks back up and says, hey, You took my friend's ID and I didn't know she had it. She took my ID out of my wallet and I didn't know she had it. I want my ID back. What would you do then?
I would probably do the same thing. You find a police officer.
Option 2.
Yeah.
Good answer. Okay. What Manny just described is what's called in the civil liability world an industry standard. Now, he and I discussed this, but I asked him the same questions off air. And, when I said I train to industry standards, I need people to understand that you're really working on two premises. One is the legal premise and the other is the civil liability premise. You got no liability. Granted, if you listen to our liability podcast, you're always liable, but there's no criminal liability if you follow the industry standard and it's not listed as illegal. For example, in Florida, there's no listing that you can confiscate an ID. So what Manny described is, it's not them. You look at it. You say, I'm sorry. I'm not going to let you in. We're not going to give this back to you. You're going to have to leave. In a minute, she leaves. Well, now she's abandoned that ID. Even though it's a state of Florida issued ID, she walked away. It's an abandoned ID. That is an industry standard. Part 2 of Manny's comment, if she insists, no, I want it back. Or even if the owner of the ID comes up to the door and says, no, I want my ID back. You go to number 2. You know what? I can't give it to you because you tried to break the law. No, I know it wasn't you. It was your friend that took your ID. Whatever you want to tell me, I can't give it back. Go find a cop. Or if you want to wait 5 or 10 minutes when I am free, I will call the police for you. Now, if the cops ever show up and the person's there, you don't care. You've done what you can do. If the cop says, let me see the ID, give it to them, get their name, make sure you document it, because if the cop decides to give it back to either one of them, your ass is covered as best you can. Many times, remember what we said earlier, the cops don't get training on this type of thing, and they don't know what to do, so they'll err on the side of simplicity and just give it back to either person.
Yeah, because it's a nuance of the law that, the common man doesn't know that.
Correct.
For most door guys, they don't know it.
And it's not taught in any police academy.
Yeah, so it's something that you have to know.
So here now you've got your 2 girls. Your one that comes back that says it's mine, I don't know how she got it. Or the one that says, I need my ID back. You're full of crap, bouncer. You're full of crap, manager. That's me. Give them a few minutes to think about it. And remember, they may be intoxicated. And then if you have to, call the police. But don't be afraid to call the police for this issue. Manny, do you still remember the non-emergency number for San Diego?
232.
If you had an emergency, you'd call 911.
Yeah.
Is this an emergency with?
No.
531-2000 for San Diego.
I was going to say 6,000.
531-2000, and you get at the bottom of the list for priority, and the cops would be there in about 3 hours.
I do have the San Diego non-emergency number on my favorites on my phone.
See that?
Yeah.
Now, the idea would be if you're in the state of Florida, where our scenario is, there's no legal confiscation. You hold it and tell them, look, we're going to call the police and give it to the cop. Once again, what will this underage person do? Probably leave because they don't want to be around when the police come. Now they've abandoned it again. If it's the owner of the ID who gave it to this underage person and they're trying to okie doke you and lie, you don't care. Don't take it personal. Tell her I can't. Let her sit off to the side and call the non-emergency phone number for this city that you're in Florida. When the cops finally get there, who cares? Give it to them. Now, if it's after closing, too bad. They're going to come and see your clothes, and that's that. You're not giving the ID to this girl. And you've covered the industry standard to cover yourself for this underage person. There's one other point regarding the true ID and borrowed. We've covered everything you need to really know, and you may have questions, but if you think about what we just said, you'll answer your own questions. The final one is, what if you want to just give it back, Manny? What if you don't want the confrontation? She doesn't leave on her own, so it's not abandoned, and you just decide, here, get out of here, and you give it back. Can you do that?
You can do that.
Yep, you absolutely can. And I have clients that they choose not to argue. They don't even threaten to call the police. They don't even threaten to hold it. They just say, I'm sorry, this isn't you. It's clearly not you. And they give it back. Now,
can I say a reason why I would want to keep it?
I think we're all thinking why we want to keep it. Tell me.
Well, here's my thought, is if this person is going to attempt to get into my establishment using a fake or altered ID and it's given back to them, I'm guessing that they're going to probably try it at another time with a different bouncer.
And that's a good thought, but what are they going to do that night?
Well, they'll probably go to some other bar.
They go down the street and maybe they get into that other bar. Maybe they don't. Maybe they do. But your worry is my biggest worry. Okay, if they leave, we've done what we can do. But a next Thursday night, next Tuesday during the day, we don't have a door guard working that sharp. And they do get in.
Well, it's kind of like one of those scenarios where the little kid's caught shoplifting at the store, and he gets caught by security, and I'm going to call your mom. You have to do something in order to try to prevent this from happening again.
You know, you opened this door for me, Manny, and I'm telling you, I've done the research on this. When I was a police officer, I wanted to know why people steal, shoplifters. And the number one reason of shoplifters, after they were finally arrested and given some sort of sanction, either jail, fines, probation, the number one reason when they were surveyed why they continued to do it, because when they were caught the first couple of times, there was nothing done, and it was easy. Well, it's the same thought process here. If Susie, college student at 19, comes to your bar and she realizes, oh, they just gave it back. Let's go do it again. This is cake. And then she does get in. But she realizes that 1 in 5 times she gets turned away. And the ID is given back. No consequence. And you're setting yourself up for failure.
Plus, you know, the idea of trying to initiate the abandoned ID or confiscating the ID, it makes it more difficult for them to actually beat the system. So we got to do what we got to do what we can do in order to try to prevent that. Because if that person does get in, and then if they do start drinking, a couple things can happen. One is you can have an inspection, and if ICE comes in or your police department comes in and asks for the ID, they're not going to give them their fake ID or altered ID. They're just going to say either I'm caught, but the fact remains is that that's still on the establishment because you allowed it to happen. And if something like that happens and there's a suspension on your license, you're looking at the livelihood of every employee, the ownership. So there's a lot at stake.
Let me give you a worse case scenario. Susie, the 19-year-old, gets in and drinks.
Well, I was going to get into that.
You're getting there?
So the first one is just her getting caught. The second one is
the criminal liability of her getting caught.
Yeah. What if something happens to Susie? What if she drinks too much? What if she gets into a car? What if the last known place she left was your establishment? Now she's dead. What are the parents going to do?
Civil liability is pretty crystal clear on this, and each state is different, but most states discuss whether you knew she was underage or should have known, and some states they don't care. If she was served as underage, you're done if she gets hurt later. You have to really be careful for that reason. And again, if you listen to our civil liability podcast some time ago, you'll understand we're not attorneys. We're just giving you
podcast 2 and 3.
The podcast 2 and 3. We're not attorneys. We're just letting you know that there is great civil liability if you're not doing these type of things. The final thing I'll leave you with regarding the true state-issued ID that you're getting at the door or at the table at the bar is have a written policy on it. Like everything we've ever discussed to you, put it on paper. Tell your employee what you expect.
Train them.
Give them some training and have them sign off what they need to do. Because if you're not training them and they make a mistake, it's all on management when something else happens. At least have something there to give yourself some protection.
And when it comes to ID policy, and we didn't really talk about acceptable forms of ID, but a good idea too is, in my opinion, is when you have a policy on your IDs, of what's acceptable, post that at the door so there's not an argument with the patrons on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Because it's funny, the psychology that goes into when people see it on paper, written, and it's concrete, they're a lot more accepting of the rules that you have in place. If they feel like you're just making it up off the cuff, you're going to get more resistance.
And the whole idea of that is, well, there's so many reasons to post things like that, whether it's dress code, but certainly posting at your door, these are forms of acceptable ID. We do not take these. And if you're caught, we do this. You will definitely scare away some of these underage people that don't want to risk it.
Yeah, because I mean, again, the psychology, if I'm underage and I am trying to sneak into a place or use a fake ID and I see the policy at the door, it might even be that's prevention enough because that's going to scare me away.
Correct.
Have those policies posted. It's a good idea. Now, we've talked about the borrowed ID.
Legitimate state-issued, government-issued ID.
This is a real ID, but it's borrowed.
Correct.
The next part of this is
and this is
a fake.
Correct. And fake is a great word, but folks, I'm telling you, these fakes that are out there are scaring the feds, meaning the federal agencies, TSA, ATF, FBI. The overseas fakes that are getting over here are really scary. They're reading on ID scanners. They have the right holograms. They have the right colors. And unless you have one or two that you discover somehow that they are fake, you'll never learn because they look so good. And it's kind of a cover for you when you do get one and they get caught inside, because every state has a similar law that says if you're doing the right thing at the door, if you're truly checking for fakes and bad IDs, and one gets by you, they look back on, did you do the right thing at the door? And these IDs are so good.
Was your due diligence in place?
That's right. And these IDs are so good that you are checking correctly, but they're so good that they're getting by. So let's quickly talk on those. This is a real easy one. And I know when I give these classes, people are kind of amazed that it is this easy, and they never thought of it this way. Remember, the first ID we talked about is, for example, the Texas driver's license. It's issued and owned by the state of Texas, that document proving this person is eligible to drive a motor vehicle.
On that note,
yeah,
you say state, but also a passport.
Correct. The other ID is the federal ID that's issued by the federal government. That document is owned by the feds. It's not your right to have a military ID. It's a privilege to join the military and get that ID. It's not your right to drive in the state of Connecticut. You got to go take a test, pass an exam, and then you'll get issued that ID, and it belongs to the state, and they could revoke it for several reasons. So that's the true issued ID by a government agency. This ID that we're talking about is the fake. It's not real. It's issued by, JoJo's meat factory in the back door.
There's no JoJo's meat factory.
I couldn't think of something better, but it's issued by a fake agency out of the country, even in our own country, and it's not a real government document. Now, some of you old school guys that are in a small town, you may have not seen these, and if you did, you didn't know it. But 10 years ago, the novelty ID thing was still out there, and they would print on one side, novelty ID, not for use. They don't do that anymore. You can still get those, and you can order them with, McLovin from the movie. You can order them with the president's face on the ID, and you can order those. Those are super cheesy, and I don't think they'd ever get by.
Can I tell a story here?
Tell a story.
Real quick. So I have a friend, James, and Bob knows James. James had a couple IDs, but one of them was a Pennsylvania ID, and the name on the ID was Peter Panda, and the picture on the ID was an actual mascot panda. And I don't know how many times we would go to places and he would pull that out and get right in, nobody. It was just to demonstrate the adeptness or
the lack of concern
or focus from the door guys. Hey, thanks, Peter. Have a good time.
I used to use I used to take underage people, and we would do minor decoy operations. And when I wanted to show them, when they thought, no, everyone's going to know, well, I purposely got an African American girl and a white girl, and I had them switch IDs. And
you should not miss this.
How could you not see that the girl presenting this in front of you is a black girl, and she's using a white girl's ID, and they would still get in. So it doesn't surprise me that Peter Panda would get in. Way to go, James.
So then he would continue to use that ID. And one time we were actually at a sports arena for a hockey game, and there was a bar attached to the arena, and he tried to use it. And the guy confiscated it. He was having none of this. I'm not going to. And we were trying to convince him this was a joke. He had his real ID, and he's like, nope, not giving it back. So that guy.
Yeah. And this guy, and it was a bartender because they understand the consequence.
No, it was just a door guy.
Oh, good, even better. Back to the fake thing. Remember, what we're talking about, these are true fakes, okay? Don't get anything in your head. Don't think of anything else. These are not legitimate government-issued IDs. Having said all that, they hold no more weight than a piece of paper. If If Susie walked up to your door and she wrote on a piece of paper, "I'm over 21, really, trust me," and gave it to you, what would you do with that piece of paper?
How hot is she?
She's hotter than fire.
No,
You would look at it and
Pound
go,
sand.
what the hell is this? Get out of here. And you'd crumple it up and you throw it on the ground, or you give it back to her, or you show it to your buddies and laugh at it. And it would carry absolutely no weight. I'm telling you right now, if you know what your job is and you get an internet fake ID, you can do the same thing. Bend it, tear it up, fold it up, cut it up, put it in your pocket. Don't give it back. No pass go, no collect $200. It is fake, and it's not a government-issued ID. It belongs to person trying to give it to you. So don't be afraid of that. Please listen to me here. This is a fake ID. Don't get wrapped up in, well, yeah, but what if? What if what? It's fake. If she gets pissy and wants to go get a cop, let her. Tell her you'll call him for her. And when the cop comes up, show the cop why it's fake. If they want to give it back, you fall back on the same thing you did with a real one. You get the cop's name, and you make sure when the cop says, why do you want my name? You say, just be honest, because it's a internet fake ID bought from China, and you're giving it back to the underage person. We don't want the liability, and I want to make sure I get your name spelled right. I guarantee you that cop will now take a big deep breath, swallow, and not give it back. He'll ask for other identification from this underage person. But remember, this is a simple topic. This is a fake ID. It's not real. Take it. It's yours. No paper needed. No nothing needed. It's yours. It's fake.
All right, so let's recap it, Robert. On a borrowed ID, because it is a state or a federal ID, some states don't allow that, and so you have to go with the option of an abandoned ID.
Correct.
I'm going to hold on to this until law enforcement shows up. On a fake ID, doesn't matter where you are, you can confiscate that because it's not real.
It's not real.
It's not real. So it doesn't belong to the state, doesn't belong to the federal government.
And Manny, think about this, and I've had this happen one time. Out of hundreds of thousands that guards that I've worked with have confiscated that are fake, altered, like overseas IDs, one guy called the police and said, "Hey, this guy took my ID. I paid money for that. It doesn't matter that it's fake." He got arrested, drunk in public, passing a bad ID, possession of a bad ID.
Well, they just had that story out of Fort Collins too, where the two kids got in with the fake IDs and then they left, and then they called the cops on themselves because they were confiscated. Their IDs got confiscated, and they called the cops on themselves. So that was an interesting story. All right, so those are the two things. Is there anything else that we want to touch base on?
I just want to, no, I'm good to go. I don't want to touch base on anything new. Just remember, this isn't rocket science. You either know it's borrowed because it's not the person's description and they don't answer the questions, and then you fall back on what your state law says, confiscate, or you fall back on the industry standard, which is abandoned. And secondly, if it's a truly fake ID, internet fake, and you know it, whether it's too glossy, it's the wrong hologram, it's got the key or some other hologram you know is fake, it's yours. Put it in your pocket. Tell them to go away. They know it's fake.
There's one last thing that I wanted to mention, and I just want operators and management to consider. And it works if you're in the state of California, and that's a bounty program. And if you're not familiar with what that is, what we would do is we would offer a bounty for confiscated IDs, borrowed or fake. And the way the program would work is if I have a lead door guy and he comes across a fake ID, we would pay him per ID on the confiscation. That would normally be like $20 or $25 for each ID. What this would do is it would incentivize the guy to make sure he's doing his job right.
Even though he's supposed to be doing the job, it gives them a little bit extra incentive, kick in the pants it's a monetary incentive to do it even better.
Yeah, and it makes him really hyper vigilant. But the conditions of that would be is whenever he's going to confiscate an ID, he had to call a manager over to verify. And then what we would do is we'd have him fill out some paperwork, some documentation on that confiscated ID. In exchange for that, at the end of the night, we pay him $25. Again, in California, this works really well. Other states, you're going to have to find out whether or not this is permissible and allowed. But it really is a good way to make sure your guys are doing the right job. And it also offers them another way to augment their income by the bounty program.
Let me mention that, number one, there is no law in any state that says you cannot have a bounty program for catching bad, fake, borrowed IDs. So what we want you to check within the law is your own state. Can you confiscate IDs? If you want to put up a bounty program and you're from Florida, there's no confiscation law, and you want to have a bounty program to find underage people at the door using bad IDs of any kind, put the bounty program in. It's a good practice. I got to caveat that, though. I was working for the Boulder, Colorado Police Department. They had me come out and do some training, and they thought they had a couple of bars that were doing things a little bit funny and hinky. And sure enough, when I went in to watch undercover, they would catch an underage college student with a bad ID. They tell this college student, look, we got a bounty of $50. I'm going to call my manager. I'm going to make $50 on this. You just made me $50. They'd say that 2 or 3 times, and the college student would go, well, can I buy it back for $50? And they open the door, and sure enough, you would see on film, video, the college student bargaining with the bouncer who was holding the ID, put it in his pocket, college student walk away, come back from the ATM, and buy it for $60, $80, or $100. The important point Manny made was getting management involved to try to circumvent crooked bouncers at the door selling the IDs back, because now that becomes a felony when they're selling a borrowed ID for the purpose of what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that goes, the problem with that is obviously with your staff that you have in place and how much do you trust them. And it's a good point of who you have at your door, your gatekeeper. You have to have a high level of trust that they're doing the right thing and that these are, solid people with a good moral compass and they're doing the right thing. Robert, I think that pretty much covers everything for this topic as far as confiscation
and we understand that this was not an ID checking podcast. We're not talking about acceptable IDs, what to do, blah, blah, blah. That's something else. We just want you to understand, because it comes up a lot when I give these classes. Confiscate or not, abandon or not, real versus true fakes.
All right. I think that pretty much wraps up the main topic, but we'd like to invite everybody just to stick around for a couple more minutes. We have some announcements to make, and we'll wrap up the show, so stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, then, and welcome back. Robert, I was on our break here. It just occurred to me we forgot to mention one of our clients in Florida. You just got back from Florida. 11 Gentlemen's Club. Yeah,
pretty unbelievable. If you guys get a chance, look this place up, just even on the internet, to see what they're doing. We were down there training 2 venues, and 11 is by far one of the largest, more advanced, more involved, more true show gentlemen's club that I've seen across the country. It's in Miami, and they're open 24/7. They've got a ultra lounge that they run besides the gentlemen's club, and they use 𝐍𝐒 𝐖𝐞𝐿 comes in 3 days a week. They are highly VIP. They are nonstop. This is
the 24/7, right?
24/7. And there was a great article. If any of you get the chance, you can see it online.
We can also put a link.
Put in the show notes to the article by Dave Manick and the magazine
ED Publications.
It's ED Publications, Exotic Dancer Bulletin. And they did a 12-page spread on the build-up, the contracting, the building, the design, the staff, who's running this thing, and they got some real go-getters to run this place. Derek, thanks for your hospitality out there. He's their head of security. Derek, it made me laugh that, he did some work for the Jonas Brothers as their head of security. And just some of the stories were pretty funny. But Derek, thanks for the hospitality with 11.
Yeah, thanks, 11. And again, that was actually, once again, a client that we got through
Saved them a lot of money.
Yeah, HI Insurance in Pike Barber over there in the Florida area. So
if you're interested in that, what we just mentioned, HIA, Hospitality Insurance Agency in Pike, is really helping out the operators that are proactive in getting our training, because he sees the benefit in reducing losses. And that's what 11 did.
They've recognized the fact that clients that go through our program have significantly reduced their claims against the liability and assault and battery insurance. So if you need more information, we have links on our website for that as well. Robert, announcements for what's coming up. I know we got the Nightclub and Bar Show coming up.
That's a big one we're working on. We got a training in D.C., we got training in L.A., training in San Diego. The dates are on our website. But the big one, and we encourage you, if you get a chance, I know a couple of listeners have already told me via email that they're going to stop by the booth and hear me speak. But Nightclub and Bar from the 23rd to the 27th of March in Las Vegas. Just an unbelievable show, and we've pitched it several times. We don't get any money for pitching it, but we think the industry needs to be there. The educational seminars are second to none, and I think by far the best one will be, that's my seminar, Monday at 2:10 on understanding legal issues surrounding force.
So yeah, if you're in Vegas during that time too, please come by our booth and visit us, introduce yourself. We'd love to meet you.
Booth number 115.
115. You got that? We'll put that on the show notes as well. Robert, also coming up here quickly, you have the DC host training.
Once again, put together by Skip Coburn, DC Nightlife Association, and the Restaurant Association of Metro DC. We'll be at one of our great partners in DC with Shadow Room, 𝐍𝐒𝐂 𝐖𝐞𝐿, letting us use his venue for the training again, Monday and Tuesday, 10th and 11th of March. So please, if you're interested, let us know. Send an email, go to our website. You can log in and even sign up for the class there.
And this is a little bit off in the distance, but we have the California PSO training coming up, Typhoon Saloon. That's going to be April 14th, 15th, and 16th. We'll have that on our website as far as the in-person training.
If you're in San Diego County or the area and you want to come in to get your state license in California, you can do that. And I think we've got something coming up too in L.A.
In L.A., our L.A. trip is actually the 9th, 10th, and 11th. We'll be doing the California PSO in the L.A. area as well. So
that's of April.
You'll be able to register on our website. We'll be working with Cliff Ziegler. We don't have a location secured yet, but we're working on that. I think that'll probably be happening the next couple of days. So look for that. And if you have any questions, please make sure you reach out to us, questions@nightclubsecurity.com, where you can put them on the comments part of the show notes. If you have suggestions as far as show topics, please let us know. And what else we got, Robert?
And last but not least, we haven't mentioned it this whole show, take our online training courses. This is second to none. It's job-specific bouncer training.
Yeah, definitely. Check out our online training program. If you're in an area where we don't get to often and you need some additional training, check it out. Take a look at what we got to offer. We have the California PSO license online. We have the National Host Platinum, which is our national program. We have a new hire bouncer training.
That's one of our more successful ones too.
New hire?
Yeah, where you get someone that you want to give them the basics to work, and you get them done through the new hire program.
And then we have our individual course components that you can take individually. They're short 1 to 2 hour courses that you can take. So check those out. We'd love for you to see what we have to offer. And again, thanks for joining us. Oh, one last thing. If you have a friend or a coworker in the industry that would benefit from listening to this podcast, the only way we can grow is if you share us. So please pass us along, share us with a friend, email them a link. We're available from our website. You can find us on iTunes. So please pass us along. We'd love to reach as many people as we can. All right, Robert, I think that's it for today's show. I'm Manny Marquez.
I'm Robert Smith.
And be nice.